Hello, and welcome to the DAMES webinar series. At DAMES, Differently Abled Mothers Empowerment Society, we strive to provide empowering materials to parents who are raising special needs children, like this webinar you are going to watch today. I hope that it's helpful and enjoy. Hello, DAMES members. Thank you so much for joining this webinar today. Today, I'm very excited to have Dr. Kelly Band with us. She is a Vice President of Clinical Development at Allied Pediatric Therapies. She has a doctorate in behavioral health from ASU, and she is a board certified BCBA. Kelly, I am so excited for you to be here today. I know when the pandemic hit, so many families had a lot of problems just handling the behavior issues that they saw in their children. And I think that just information like this is invaluable to parents who are struggling and trying to help their children through the pandemic. So thank you so much for putting this together and for being here today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I will let you take it away.
Perfect. All right. So we're going to go through data collection and the rationale behind it, functions of behavior, and then some practical application strategies to be able to do at home. So the reason that data collection is really important, when we're looking at challenging behaviors, we need to be able to understand why they're happening in order to be able to treat them in general. So looking at what we call our three-term contingency. So this is going to be our antecedent, our behavior, and our consequence. The behavior, obviously, we know what that is, and then we're going to look at what happens before and after. And then when we piece all of that together, we're really able to fine tune on the why. So why is it happening? What is maintaining it? And then from there, we know what we can change. We know what we need to change. We know how to look at it differently, whether it's specifically in the context of the environment, but there's a lot of different things that we can do or we can employ in order to see different changes in that challenging behavior. The reason that it's also important for us as parents to be able to take that data and understand why it's happening is that, especially if you already have an ABA provider and you're already working with behavior analysts, if you see something come up that they haven't seen yet, you'll be able to at least document it in a way that helps them out. So you can say, hey, this is happening. This is why, here's the data that I took. And it gives them an idea of exactly what they're looking for, and it gives them a better jumping off point rather than completely starting from scratch. There are different kinds of ABC data, and that's what we call antecedent behavior consequence. So there are different types of ABC data. You could do it more in narrative form, or you can do it in more of a structured format. A structured format, you can find different kinds of forms online if you type in structured ABC forms. And that'll have different categories or different types of antecedents already laid out for you, and you just check the box. And the same thing with the consequence side, it'll have different consequences. So I gave them attention, I gave them a reprimand, and then you're able to just go through and check the box. It's really whatever your preference is and how you're able to gather the most information in the moment. One of the things that we'll also go through here a little bit more clearly are some setting events. And setting events are some things that aren't necessarily talked about too often, but are very helpful to understand the full context of each challenging behavior. So, as I said, briefly mentioned at least, the antecedent occurs before the behavior or before the targeted response. So I see a red traffic light, I stop my car. So the red traffic light was the antecedent before I pushed on the brake. And the pushing on the brake to stop my car is my behavior. I ask a question, what is your name? That is the antecedent. Then the targeted response is my name is Michelle, or something like that. The antecedent could be a friend took your son's toy and they either engaged in a challenging behavior or asked for it back, or whatever that ended up looking like as well. So The antecedent happens before the behavior itself. We all know that behavior is something we say and do. And when behavior analysts are looking at specific behavior, we're looking at things that are very descriptive and very precise. So aggression can be many different things. It can be hitting, biting, kicking, throwing, head banging. There's a lot of different things that go into that. So if it's not enough to say that my child is aggressive or my child is having some type of aggressive behavior, we need to really be descriptive of what it looks like. So what are they doing that is aggressive? And then the consequence. So consequences happen immediately following that target behavior, that challenging behavior. So the thinking through some of the examples. So the examples that we had given. So my behavior was I pushed on the brake. The immediate consequence was my car stopped. The behavior was your child answered the question, what is your name? You answered Michelle. And I say, nice to meet you, Michelle. So my me verbally addressing nice to meet you is the consequence. If a friend takes your son's toy, the behavior is your son cries and goes to tell the teacher, then the consequence would be teacher says, thanks for telling me, here's your toy back, or let's go get it, or whatever the problem solving is. So even though, and this is one thing to note as well, so even though consequence has a negative connotation in secular terms, in ABA world, it only means what happens after. And now here's some setting events. And I think that these are really important and they are not often immediately talked about, especially when we're talking to families. So it's always really helpful for you, for us as parents, to really think through the challenging behaviors in the context of some of these. So some of the most common setting events are, is your child tired? If your child is tired, they are more likely going to engage in some kind of challenging behavior for something that isn't, typically quote unquote a big deal. Are there medication changes happening? So we would absolutely see changes in behavior based on medication, whether it's changes for the better or changes for the worse. Is your child hungry? Other biological or physical factors, are physiological factors, are they getting sick? So a lot of times that happens, we'll see a spike in challenging behavior if they're getting sick. Even thinking about an infant, they oftentimes get more fussy if they are getting a cold or something like that. So all of these things have an impact on behavior. Thinking about, I wrote down like rough morning or you stepped in gum. All in all, those things aren't that big of a deal. But if you're already having a rough morning or your child is having a rough morning and then they get to school and their best friend isn't there. So normally their best friend might not be there on some days and it's okay. And everyone kind of just goes on with the school routine. But if they've had a really rough morning for whatever reason, and then their best friend isn't at school, they might end up having more meltdowns or something like that. So having a rough morning would be a setting event that happens before the antecedent of their best friend not being there. And then as behavior analysts, we look at all of that information. So we look at those setting events, we look at the antecedents and the consequences, and then we start to notice different patterns. And looking at, all right, if my child has a rough morning, 9 times out of 10, they're going to engage in more meltdowns. That would be a pattern that we would really be able to pick out and then start to treat from there or start to modify different things in the environment or the context from there. Then when that really cues us in as behavior analysts as well to be able to focus on where to adjust those setting events. So for example, I pick my son up from school right before snack, and we go to speech therapy, and I always have a snack for him in the car. if I do that, he does better with his participation during speech therapy because he's not hungry. So that's a modification that I make, knowing that if he gets hungry, he's usually more likely to melt down, flop out of his chair, whatever shenanigans he comes up with in the moment. Then looking at also the consequences. So consequences, again, just what happens after, it's nothing bad, but consequences that come after that challenging behavior. What is the child getting out of it? What are they getting out of it most often? Even reprimands, and we'll go into functions of behavior here next, but looking at those patterns. So my child always gets my attention, or my child never has to follow through and put their shoes away. Thinking through those patterns of what they're consistently getting from their challenging behavior, those consistent reactions, that is going to help us fine tune what that function is. Then we're able to figure out how to treat from there and what to modify. And then I wanted to say too, making sure that when we're looking at challenging behaviors, the data helps us only compare apples to apples. So I'm only looking at aggression in these instances for the specific pattern or that specific function. So if I notice that there are a couple different reactions that my child is getting from their challenging behavior, then that would be, I would not lump those into one type of strategy that is going to solve everything. So we really look at comparing apples to apples. So each different type of function is how we treat with certain strategies, but we might need multiple strategies on the antecedent end and the consequence end in order to see behavior changes across the board. Okay, so here's the functions of behavior that I was talking about. So ABA says that there are 4 main functions of challenging behavior in the context of our science. We have attention seeking, gaining access to tangibles, escape and avoidance, and then what we call automatic reinforcement, which we'll go into each of these here right now. So again, thinking about the function, this is something that your child is getting, some kind of reaction from the environment and the people in it when they do engage in those challenging behaviors. So attention-seeking behaviors, this is where your child may engage in a problem behavior to obtain something, some kind of attention from another individual, whether it is you as the parent, whether it's the teacher in the classroom, whether it's the peer or their friend or their sibling. So they're looking for some form of reaction from that individual. The tricky thing, and one of the most counterintuitive things about attention-seeking behavior, is that attention, it can either be positive and good, or it can be bad. So I could be really frustrated and I could be reprimanding my child, but I'm still giving them the attention. And that could still maintain that challenging behavior, just as if I was saying, good job, buddy, here's a high five and a hug. So it's all the same in that moment. And I know that sounds really wonky when we're thinking about challenging behaviors, but for many of our kids, it maintains the challenging behavior just the same, whether it's a good attention or a bad attention. So now gaining access to tangibles as a function. This is where your child will engage in some kind of challenging behavior to get a desired item or activity. This is the proverbial candy in the grocery store lines at the checkout. They always want, your child might engage in a challenging behavior tantrum. I want the candy bar. I want the candy bar. And then, you end up having to give it to them in order for that challenging behavior to decrease or to stop in the moment. But then in that random example, the challenging behavior worked. They were able to get what they wanted. This is also thinking about too, it's not only tangible items, it's also activities, or kind of getting them whatever it is that they want, getting them access to different things. They might be able to play a certain game that they want. If you're playing a family game, or your child is playing a game with their siblings, and they want to play a specific way, maybe not following the rules, they might engage in a meltdown or a challenging behavior so that the sibling gives in or says, fine, I don't want to play with you and you can play the way that you want. All of those things, looking at being able to uh, play the way that they want to do, the play that they play the way that they want to, excuse me, or get whatever they want to out of the interaction. So escape and avoidance, this is something that we often see with specific non-preferred activities, a lot of times in school or academic type tasks, homework, things of that nature. This is where they'll engage in a challenging behavior to get out of something or to avoid something altogether. So think about something like a dreaded meeting that you have. Maybe you have a little bit of a headache. Normally you'd power through, but you're like, I just do not want to I don't want to go to that meeting, so I'm going to call out sick today. So that would be an escape maintained behavior to avoid that meeting. So, thinking through each of the instances where your child might engage in a challenging behavior, thinking through like, oh, I just asked them to do their math homework, or especially with the potential of virtual school, hopefully not again, but with that potential, if you're trying to help them through, let's sit in front of the computer and they're flopping on the floor, or whatever they're doing, that might be classified as having a function of escape or avoidance. And then we have automatic reinforcement. Automatic reinforcement usually comes into contact with one of the five senses. So it's usually something that looks good, feels good, sounds good, smells good, or it's to escape something aversive, like a loud noise or a bright light. So some kind of pain attenuation or something along those lines. So hand flapping, for example. And I know that these are all very stereotypical examples, but just for the context of clarity. So if you have hand flapping, there's a lot of things that go into hand flapping. There's the kinesthetic movement of your wrist. If their child is doing it close to their face, they're able to there's some visual contact. They see their hand going back and forth. They might feel the wind on their face. So there's a lot of things related to the five senses that goes into hand flapping. Thinking about when a fire truck goes by with their sirens on, if your child covers their ears, or the fire alarms that go off in schools, if your child covers their ears, that is a form of automatic reinforcement. So it's stifling that sound. That's part of the pain attenuation. Usually when it comes to automatic reinforcement as a function, it's really trial and error, especially for those kids that can't tell us exactly what they're getting out of it. So as I mentioned, hand flapping, for example, there's three or four different types of feelings that one can get from hand flapping. So if somebody doesn't say, oh, when I get excited, I like the way it feels in my wrists or my hands, we're usually behavior analysts are going to try a couple different things in order to really figure out what the feeling is that the individual or the child is getting out of it in order to really be able to treat that. Okay, so now let's look at why the function is so important and so vital in order to change, modify, manipulate any kind of challenging behavior that we come into contact with. So once we identify what that function is, then we're able to intervene on the behavior. If we don't know what the function is as a behavior analyst, we cannot do anything to treat the behavior, to change the behavior, or anything like that, because there are some pretty severe ramifications that we would, accidentally reinforce the behavior and make it continue, or make it stronger, or make it more intense, more severe, or something like that. So think about, if you say, buddy, I need you to go put your backpack away, and your child throws their backpack on the floor. I don't want to put it away. And they throw it on the floor. And you say, you know what? You don't talk to me like that. That's not okay. Go to your room. Okay, well now, typically in, secular world, that's how I would assume the majority of us were raised is, oh, you didn't do what I asked, go to a timeout. That's a pretty common consequence for that. But I just asked them to put their backpack away. So now the backpack's still on the floor and they're in their room. They didn't have to put it away like I asked. So that could accidentally reinforce that behavior if they were trying to escape not putting their backpack away. So that's why, again, that figuring out what that function is so critical in order to change or modify any challenging behavior that we need to do or that we come into contact with. So going back to our data collection piece, all of that goes hand in hand. So being able to collect that data, understand what they're getting out of it, and then classify it in one of those four functions is really going to help us be able to intervene appropriately so that we don't accidentally reinforce or maintain any challenging behaviors. All right, so let's look at the antecedent side of things. So this is, we're gonna go through some common strategies that we can all look at doing, specifically if your kiddos are home for extended periods of time right now, or in the near future, that we can look at doing, modifying the environment, look at employing initially in order to help decrease the likelihood that any challenging behaviors are going to happen. So, the first thing to keep in mind, anything that we do on this list or that we go through right here is not going to immediately change any kind of challenging behavior. It's going to reduce the likelihood that challenging behavior is going to occur over time. So, the first suggestion is no matter what happens with COVID, whether schools are shutting down, whether they're staying open, whatever it is, make sure that you stay as consistent as possible, regardless of what your day to day looks like. So if you're, for example, if your child is not able, the rule is we do not watch TV before we leave for school, even if your child is, doing virtual or online learning, there is no TV prior to school. So just keep those things consistent across their child's day. It'll increase expectations or clarity of expectations. It will increase compliance because it's their normal, quote unquote, normal in the abnormal world right now, their normal routine. And then in turn, it will decrease those challenging behaviors over time. So this can look like a variety of different things right now. So, if your child goes to school until 2 o'clock, and then after we have some kind of gymnastics class or something like that. So I would say to keep everything consistent, make, 8 to 2, 9 to 2 somewhat structured. And even if it's not all academic on your part, that's fine, but make it somewhat structured. And then after at 3 o'clock, when their gymnastics class normally would be, have them do some kind of physical activity. This is where they go outside. This is where they ride their bike. This is where you take them to the playground. So there's still some kind of physical activity. So they can still somewhat expect some consistency throughout their day. All right, 9 to 2 is structured time. I know that I follow this schedule and I have to do X, Y, Z. I have lunch at a similar time, and you can keep their day somewhat consistent. Totally admit it's a lot of work on the front end. So a lot of prep work from you guys as parents, really being able to think through what that could look like in a very, very different environment. So you're at home, not school or something like that. But the benefits and the payoff of that are going to be come later in the end when you don't have to deal with a lot of the challenging behaviors, especially if we're going, home from school, back to school, home from home, online learning, the back and forth and back and forth. It'll really help out across the board. So some general strategies for structuring or for reducing the likelihood challenging behaviors are going to happen in the first place. So thinking about modifying the environment, decreasing distractions, dimming the lights. Maybe you're going to be doing some virtual learning in a place where it's not a high traffic area or something along those lines. Again, the background noise of TV and the radio, all that stuff might be off. the pre-MAC principle, and we'll go through more specifically what that is as well. So that's also grandma's rule. Effective instructional delivery. So this is a really fancy behavior analyst term, and I'll break down exactly what that means. It's not as difficult as it sounds. Visual schedules, I'm sure that many of you, if not every single one of us that has ever had a child, has had a visual schedule before. So we'll go through again specifically what that could look like and how to combine visual schedules with some of these other strategies too. Avoid stacking demands. And again, I'll break this down a little bit more. I think that this is probably one of the most important things that we as parents really get into as like it's a very slippery slope when we're looking, when we're thinking about dealing with challenging behaviors. Think about the different types of requests that you're asking. If it's a really, really hard, task for your child to do, then immediately after, maybe you want to give them something easier to do, something that they can immediately be successful with, something that they're good at, something that you can automatically praise. So maybe think about staggering the different types of requests. Let's say we're at home and it's virtual learning. Your child hates math. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to do 3 math problems. But then after that, you know what? I am going to say, let's go take a break. Let's get a drink. Go to the refrigerator and grab your juice. Thanks so much for listening. I love that you just listened and got your juice like I asked. Now it's an immediate task that they are automatically going to do because they want the juice. It's something that you can praise and give them that positive feedback, and then they're going to come back and do something hard again. So kind of think about how to stagger those types of requests. Even thinking about that with visual schedules. Again, my child gets a little hangry, and before lunch is the opposite of the right time to do math because math is really hard for them. So I'm going to do it immediately following lunch, or I'm going to do it first thing in the morning. So really figure out the best time of day to do certain types of activities or certain types of requests for your child. And you obviously know your child best. So what does that look like for them? Increase novel stimuli. So again, we're in this abnormal world. It might be nice to be able to increase different things that they like. The more, I always find that the more things that are novel increase kind of compliance. Oh my gosh, you know what? We're going to do recess outside at the playground, and I'm going to have you do the monkey bars 4 times, and then we're going to do 2 minutes on the swing, and then we're going to go down the slide, or something like that. I don't know. Just increasing novel requests, increasing novel stimuli. So maybe we have your child's favorite color is pink, and you're going to get a pink mouse for them, and that way they're going to do virtual learning with a pink mouse. Normally, it's a black one that you use, but this time around, we're going to do pink because that's their favorite color. We're hoping it kind of adds a little bit of fun to their day. And you can come up with a million different ways to increase novel requests and increase novel stimuli. We talked about modifying the environment and decreasing clutter and different things of that nature. Increasing structure, we're going to touch on when we talk about visual schedules, same with choice making. And then just really clear rules and expectations. And we'll talk about that when we talk about effective instructional delivery as well. So now let's dive down a little bit deeper into a handful of these that, how am I doing on time? Okay, so we'll dive down a little bit deeper into some of these that you'll probably use most often and that would be the most beneficial and impactful for you to be able to implement. So the pre-MAC principle is grandma's rule or grandma's law. This is a first then. So first we finish our homework, then we have ice cream. First we finish our homework, then we go out to play. First we have dinner, then we have ice cream. So it's the lesser preferred followed by the more preferred. And then also keep in mind that we're not teaching anything new. We're simply using this to gain compliance. So this is already something that is in their child's repertoire. Again, we're just using it to increase motivation so that they're more likely going to follow through with our more difficult, the then task. So first we're going to complete the math worksheet, then you can go have your snack. All right, so effective instructional delivery, as I said, is a fancy behavior analyst term, but really it's a way to be able to clearly get your child's attention, lay out a clear, deliver a clear expectation, and then follow through with it. So present, not prevent, present instructions as statements rather than questions. So if my son hates school and he'll tell me I don't want to go to school this morning. So if I say, can you get dressed for school? He's gonna be like, nope, scored on that one. You want to make sure that you're stating it. Okay, I need you to go get dressed now, rather than can you. Um, and then state instructions within 3 to 5 feet of your child, especially when we're at home. It's really easy to yell from the kitchen, hey, buddy, I need you to go get dressed. But if they're in the next room, it's really easy for them to ignore that. And also, too, I don't know if my child heard me. I can't verify that. I don't know if I had their attention when I'm screaming from the next room. And it's hard for me to follow through if I haven't given them the benefit of the doubt that they heard me, I had their attention, they understood what I was saying. So make sure that you're, close enough proximity that you're able to verify that you do have their attention. Give your child enough time to respond. A lot of times, our kiddos might take a little bit of extra time to be able to process what we're asking and formulate an appropriate response, whether it is, Mom, can I brush my teeth before I go get dressed? Or actually the physical action of walking to their room to get dressed. So they might take a couple extra seconds. And I think this is something, especially when we're thinking, like the harriedness of the morning, and we're, okay, I got to get everybody ready. I got to get their brother ready. I got to get them ready. And we got to get out the door by X time. Or they have to, be on the computer by whatever, 9 a.m. Thinking through, okay, I need to slow down. I need to make sure that they have enough time to respond appropriately. So that way they're able to, we're setting them up for success. Avoid any negotiating. What you're asking them to do is what you're asking them to do. It's a very simple and clear instruction, and we're going to be able to follow through with that. Do not place any instructions that you're not willing to follow through with. So even if you have to prompt it, if you're willing to follow through, it's an acceptable instruction. If you're not, don't even bother. So if you're not, I always try to tell them, if you're not willing to go to the mat for it, don't even let it come out of your mouth. Thinking through, if we're doing virtual learning, I don't care if my child has their pajama pants still on. At this point, I might not even care if they have pants on. The point is, they got a shirt on, they got some underwear on, and they're in front of the computer at the appropriate time. So that's what matters. That's what I'm going to go to the mat for. I'm not even going to worry about pants. All right, so let's talk about visual schedules and choices. And I love visual schedules for multiple reasons. But they're so wonderful because you can combine a variety of different strategies with them. So they can be done in words or pictures, depending on the functioning level or the age of your child. We can automatically build in choices, and choices are such a great thing to be able to give them, some power, some control over it. Choices, something along the lines of like, it doesn't matter how we get from point A to point B. I don't care. The point is that we're going to get to point B. If you walk, if you skip, if I give you a piggyback ride, doesn't matter to me. We're getting there. And so be really creative with the choices that you're able to give them. If you say, all right, are you going to sit in this chair or this chair to talk to Miss Jenny, your teacher? I don't care what chair they sit in. I don't care if they sit on the floor, frankly. If they choose it, that's great. They're more likely to follow through with that. Are you going to wear pajamas, or are you going to wear your SpongeBob undies to sit in front of the computer and talk to your teacher today? Doesn't matter. They're covered up. Teacher can't see anyways. We're going with it. And then, it gives a really clear expectation of what their day looks like and what their expectations are throughout the day. Okay, I know I have to do 4 more math problems before I get my snack. And it's an easy redirection tool. So, I know you're hungry and I know you keep asking for snack, but if we look at our schedule right here, we have 3 more math problems to do, and then you can have your snack. So remember, first, now we're doing grandma's rule, first 3 more math problems, then snack. And it's something easy for them to be able to look at. And then it'll also turn into a self-management tool. So, all right, buddy, you know the rules. We got to get through the first 3 things on our schedule. So let's go ahead and do it. And then they're able to motor themselves through that eventually, depending on the functioning level or age of your child. There's also a variety of different ways that you can do it. You can set it up throughout the whole day. You can set it up for a time period. So we have to get through these 2 things in this hour. So that's what I'm setting the visual schedule for, is this hour. And it really just depends on, again, the purpose and what your day looks like. You can use it to increase and decrease structure. So one of the other strategies that we were talking about was initially, one of the general strategies was increasing structure, which does help, especially with that consistency piece if your child does end up going back to virtual school. So, all right, during the 7 to 8 o'clock hour, we are doing X, Y, Z, and this part is very structured. And then you have 30 minutes of unstructured time. So giving them those expectations of, all right, hold it together for this hour, buddy, and then you can go play in the playground outside in the backyard. And then also, it's a transferable skill for later in life. I mean, we all have our Outlook calendars. We all have our calendars on our phones. So it really is a transferable skill, whether we're doing it, starting it out in pictures, and then we're transferring it to a self-management program, and then we're transferring it to looking at a college syllabus and pulling all that out and putting it into their iPhones, or they're putting it into their iPhones. So it's a transferable skill across the lifespan too. So it's not something that we're going to put all this energy into and then it's a useless thing that we had to do. All right, and then stacking demands. So one of the things that I think most parents in general, I know that I am completely guilty of this, is that we, especially during challenging behaviors, is we'll tell our kiddos, hey, I need you to go put your backpack away. Okay, now I need you to get off the floor. Stop screaming. So now there's 3 instructions that I just gave my child when they haven't even followed through with the first one. So we typically do the initial instruction, and then it's follow all these corrective instructions. Okay, that still wasn't right. Oh, no, now get off the floor. Okay, now you're doing this. Okay, now you're too loud. And it ends up being overwhelming. You can't follow through with any of that anyways. And so we need to really make sure that we're not stacking instructions. So at this point, if I tell my child to put their backpack away and they ended up flopping on the floor, I'm not going to tell them to get off the floor. I'm going to again say, put your backpack away. I don't care if you can grab it and crawl to your room with it for all I care. But the instruction is to put your backpack away. However that gets done, even if I'm prompting you, I put it back in your hands and I help you walk to your room. The instruction is put your backpack away. And just make sure that we're not continually stacking corrective instructions one on top of the other without initially following through with that first one. Again, overwhelming for the child. We're not able to follow through with any of them. And if I can't follow through with stop yelling, what am I going to do? Force their mouth closed? Of course not. So make sure that they're all instructions that you can follow through with. But going back to a couple slides ago, we're only delivering instructions that we're willing to go to the mat over or that we can follow through with. So I can physically get them off of the floor, so that might be okay. But my first instruction that I want to follow through with is the first one that came out of my mouth. So put your backpack away, so that way they do not escape that one. All right, so now let's look at what happens after. Let's talk about some strategies for after that challenging behavior occurs. So the thing to keep in mind, and this is something that is a little nuancy with the science of ABA, is that whatever happens after the challenging behavior, it can either increase it or decrease it. So we can also accidentally increase behaviors that we do not want to see again. And that's where, identifying the function becomes even more important, as we already talked about, but making sure that we know exactly what we're increasing or what we're decreasing and how we're going to be doing that. All right. So some ABA principles, we're going to be looking at talking specifically about reinforcement and extinction and some general strategies as well. So reinforcement is something that everyone, hears all the time. And we think of it as, okay, I'm going to do my chores and I'm going to get my allowance or something along those lines. In ABA world, reinforcement only means that we're implementing something that increases a behavior. And this is always going to be something that we implement in order to for behaviors that we want to see again. So or I should say that differently. The rule of thumb is if you want to see it again, reinforce it. If you do not want to see it again, make sure that you do not reinforce it. So this is where we can accidentally increase behavior if we don't know properly what that function is. So when we're increasing a behavior, again, it can be desired or undesired. We always want to use reinforcement for strengthening behaviors, teaching new behaviors, maintaining learned skills. Those are all different things that we want to praise. We want to, whatever it might be, whether it is a token economy of some sort, like earning allowance or earning a sticker every time that they comply. If we want to see it again, that's what we want to reinforce for the child. Reinforcement must be immediate. It should always happen within 3 to 5 seconds after the behavior that you want to see. So if my child, all right, we're sitting down, we're doing some virtual school, they follow through, answer the teacher, they complete all of their math, I want to immediately reinforce. That way, the association of this behavior that I just did was deserving of my sticker, mom saying good job, me getting a break, whatever it is. We want to use continuous reinforcement for new behaviors or behaviors that need to be strengthened. So if my child has a difficult time complying, every single time that they comply, I am on it. I'm giving them stickers, I'm giving them praise, I'm somehow letting them know, oh, I love that you did this. Good job, buddy, good job. I'm their cheerleader in their corner. And then thinking about intermittent reinforcement, and this is probably a term that we don't use too terribly often when we're talking about it, but intermittent reinforcement is the most powerful type of reinforcement. And this is how we want to use intermittent reinforcement to maintain behaviors. Think about just because gifts. If your significant other gives you a just because gift, you're like, oh, I don't know what I did to deserve that, but that was really cool. So thanks, honey. Can I get you, your dinner, something to drink, whatever. You're gonna kind of up it to try to see what you did in order to get another just because gift. And that is a loose interpretation of intermittent reinforcement, but it does kind of give that point of, oh, I don't consistently get this. So when I do, I know for sure that is something that I want again. So I'm going to try and I'm going to try and I'm going to try. And, think about how can you almost think about like, how can you surprise your child? So if they every third, and you can do this very formally or very informally. So every third instruction that they comply with, they get, what, instead of a sticker, I'm going to go ahead and give you this M&M or whatever. And I'm not condoning using edible reinforcement all the time, but again, just for the point. Or think about, man, you've been doing such a great job with completing your math. Why don't you go ahead and take a 5-minute break? It's completely random. They didn't expect it. Like, oh, all right, now I'm more refreshed. I'm going to come back. I'm going to hurry up and I'm going to try to do that again so I can get another unexpected free break. And so you can do it really formally, so every third token, or you can do it informally of, we've been working really hard, let's go ahead and take a break. But thinking about uh, different ways, whatever your child's motivation is, whatever the function of their challenging behavior is, think about ways that you can use that intermittently throughout your child's day in order to continue to increase behavior that we do want to see. All right, extinction. Again, extinction is a very clinical term, but I do think it's important for us to know what extinction is, because if anybody is involved in any kind of ABA program, uh, or if your child has challenging behaviors, you will likely hear that term at some point. So extinction, all extinction means is that you're going to decrease the behavior by withholding whatever was maintaining it. It is not a punishment. It is not, I'm not, putting my child in timeout or anything like that. It is not punishment. It is simply withholding whatever was maintaining it. And this can look a variety of different ways. So extinction is always based on the function of the behavior. So going back to that data collection piece, again, it's so important to really fine tune and know exactly what the function is. So let's go ahead and we'll talk about some examples here shortly. But there are some things to note when we're talking about extinction. Anytime that you implement any kind of extinction procedure, you must be consistent. If consistency is not going to happen, then I would suggest not using extinction, because it will only make the behavior worse, and then more resistant to change in the future. So one of the most difficult things that many families run into when using some kind of extinction procedure is the extinction burst. So an extinction burst means that the challenging behavior, the target behavior that you're looking to change, gets worse before it gets better. So it does not mean that it's not working. That is an incorrect assumption. So if you're using some kind of extinction procedure and the challenging behavior, target behavior gets worse, more intense, more frequent, whatever, that means it's working. I know, again, very counterintuitive, and I had this conversation with my husband last night. It means that it's working. It can be a variety of different ways. It can mean that it's getting, it's increasing in severity during this one instance, or significantly over time throughout the week or something like that. But the most important thing is that even if it's getting worse and you think it's not working, be consistent and do exactly what is prescribed for that function, and eventually it will get better. But you think about, okay, if if my child was trying to get attention, and all of a sudden I'm withholding the attention, they're going to try louder. They're going to try to yell longer. They're going to say, mama, 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 a bunch more times to try to get that attention. And then eventually they're gonna be like, oh, that's not working. Okay, how do I get it a different way? And this is where we really need to teach them in conjunction with using extinction. So you don't yell at me, you don't scream and fall on the floor. You simply come up and say, excuse me, mama. And then that's how you get your attention. So, it definitely has to be used with a variety of other strategies as well. All right, so let's talk about what extinction can look like based on the different functions. So first, let's think about attention. So if your child is engaging in some kind of challenging behavior to gain attention, the function is attention. So attention is what's maintaining it. So you want to withhold attention. So if my child is, this is one that happened last night. I want fruit snacks. Oh my gosh, I need fruit snacks. And I already told him no, he's not getting fruit snacks before dinner. But mom, I need fruit snacks. Can I have fruit snacks? Can I have them? Can I have them? And then he's, screaming and crying. And I'm no longer answering that. He wants my attention and the fruit snacks, but he wants me to continue to answer him. So if I stop answering him, he stops asking. So that is withholding attention in that random example. And then eventually he stopped asking. Um, so thinking, okay, so let's think about escape. So if your child is trying to get out of something, so similar to the backpack example, and this again, this one's going to be a little bit more counterintuitive. So if I say, all right, buddy, you got to put your backpack away, and he flops on the floor, no, I don't want to put my backpack away. I got to go watch TV and watch my show or whatever it is. Well, if I let him do that, he's going to successfully escape my instruction of putting his backpack away. So then I would grab and I would or prompt him, pick him up off the floor, prompt him, and help him put his backpack away. So he's not escaping the task of putting a backpack away. I'm technically prompting him through it and helping him, but he's also not getting to watch his show, and he is still having to follow through with the instruction. Think about it in terms of maybe virtual school or homework or something a little bit more academic. So, all right, buddy, it's time to sit down in front of, we're looking at the computer, talking to our teacher, Miss Jenny, and here's your pencil, and they throw the pencil. Nope, I'm not doing it. I'm throwing my pencil. Okay, well, I'm not going to tell them, don't you throw your pencil. Come on, buddy, we have to do it. I'm going to go get their pencil and I'm going to put it back in their hand. They throw it again. I'm going to do that over and over again. I'm just giving them their pencil back. They are not escaping the task, and we're going to eventually follow through with it through prompting, but they are not escaping the task by throwing their pencil. And now thinking about the function of access, well, this is access to tangibles or access to activities of some sort. So if you're going through the grocery line and your child is crying because they want the candy bar, because all the grocery store people hate parents, then we would not give them access to that candy bar. We would say, nope, we are not getting that candy bar. We go through, everyone looking at us like we're horrible parents because we have our kids screaming and crying and we're not giving in. We're not giving them that candy bar. That candy bar, access to that candy bar would reinforce their behavior. So I'm going to withhold that reinforcement and they are not getting access to that candy bar. So extinction looks different based on the function. And I think this is where a lot of times it's counterintuitive to the way that we were raised. So if my child throws their backpack, you get a timeout. But that would actually be reinforcing the behavior. So I'm going to follow through with my instruction. Thinking through some of those different things once you know what that function is. All right, we are almost done, but I wanted to share a couple different easy checklist items to know when to use extinction and when not to use extinction. So if behaviors happen consistently or fairly regularly, that would be a good time to be able to use extinction. If they happen too infrequently, the child is not going to miss that reinforcement often enough in order to really change that behavior. So we want to use it when we're thinking about those challenging behaviors that happen a little bit more often. Use it when you can follow through. If it's something that you are physically unable to follow through with, make sure that you do not implement any kind of extinction procedures. And then make sure everyone is on the same page. So again, this is the conversation I had with my husband last night of like, all right, if we're doing this, we're doing this. Here's how we're doing it. I'm going to give you, a wink and a nod, and that means you do this, or you follow this direction, or you implement just as I'm implementing it, so we don't accidentally intermittently reinforce any of these behaviors. When not to use extinction. So if behaviors are dangerous or aggressive, we want to make sure that we don't use extinction, especially if we need to block or anything like that, or if there's any kind of attention component to them. Also, too, if your child doesn't like physical prompting, we would not use an extinction procedure if the function is escape. So if I have to follow through and physically prompt your child to write their name on their paper, I am not going to fight that battle, and use extinction to not let them escape that. We're going to be able to use some different strategies. And then again, if people are not on the same page or if behavior is happening consistently, that is not the time to employ uh, this strategy. And then one of the most important things that I know this year has been really tough on um, a lot of parents, especially with schools shutting down, virtual school. Um, Make sure you always know that you're doing a great job. It's tough. We have some of the best kiddos, but we also have, they also have some challenging behaviors, and it take a lot out of you or us as parents in general to be able to implement some of these strategies and be so consistent, especially when we need breaks too. So make sure you take some time for yourself. Utilize all of your resources. There's tons and tons of resources nowadays. So support groups like Dames, resources like Autism Speaks, and make sure you have your key service providers in place that you can rely on too. So Ally, your speech therapist, your school's IEP team, and all of that too. And take advantage of all of those as best as you can. We're all here to support all of the parents and everything. And then I always welcome questions and any kind of feedback. If you have any feedback for me right now or individually, I'd love to hear from you on how I can make my presentation skills a little bit better, or if there's any content or anything like that that I missed, I would love to chat with you about it one-on-one. My phone numbers, you can call the office or my cell phone, and then my email address as well.
Wow, Kelly, that was amazing. So both of my children have BCBAs, and so I've been doing, you
Mhm.
know, this kind of stuff for a long time, and it always blows my mind how much more I have to learn. And so, thank you. I learned a lot today during your presentation. We do have a participant here, Kim. If you have any kind of questions, feel free to put it in the chat box. I'll be happy to ask Kelly. And I am really glad that you covered extinction bursts because I feel like it's one of the hardest things as a parent I've ever had to do to my child
Yeah.
is take them through an extinction burst, but it's kind of one of these things where it's like a massive action and a massive commitment, but that it's, long-term gain. So it might be a really hard, like 2 hours,
Yeah.
but then hopefully they're never going to do that again, right? Like, and I think
Absolutely.
it's helpful to know that because it's hard when you're sitting there going through it.
Mhm. Absolutely, especially when you think about like, oh my gosh, this has been going on for an hour. This isn't working. What do I do next? I just need to abandon and go back to the like abort mission and go back to the drawing board. And that's not it at all. So just like you said, it's so hard, especially when meltdowns or whatever the challenging behavior is can go on for long periods of time. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to sit there and watch your child, struggle through coping skills, calming down, or whatever it is. Um, but there is light at the end of the tunnel once you do get through that extinction burst. Uh,
Yes.
and again, that's why I obnoxiously stressed consistency, because if you're not consistent, you'll have to go through many of those. But the more that everyone is on the same page, and the more consistent that you can be with that, the shorter and shorter and shorter it gets. And then obviously you exit the tunnel a little bit quicker.
I also I really liked what you had to say about avoiding the stacking instructions because when you said it, I was like, yeah, sometimes I ask them to do too many things at one time, but then as you went through it and you were like, no, it's the corrective behavior instructions. And
Yeah.
I never thought of it in that way because every time I've
Mhm.
heard it before, it's like I've asked them to do too many things at one time initially. But then I never put together that the stacking could actually happen after the initial request because we're trying to do the corrective behaviors.
Right.
And I could see how that could become very overwhelming too. So that was really good insight.
Good. And I think, when we're thinking about like stacking those instructions or stacking demands, it's it's something that I think, as parents, you're like, oh, well, we need to correct this behavior really quickly and then go back through. But it's also, especially with our kiddos that have some challenges with receptive and expressive language, um, and just communication or social emotional regulation or whatever, they are not able to digest quickly enough. Well, I thought I had to put my backpack away. I'm freaking out. I'm melting down on the floor. Now I'm supposed to stop. Wait, what happened? And they can't kind of pick up the pieces to be able to follow through with that initial instruction. And we want to make sure that we're able to set them up for success, even though, again, kind of the way that we were raised, it's you address that challenging behavior as parents. When you do something you're not supposed to, it's addressed. But with a lot of our kiddos, we need to be able to, okay, putting the backpack away was the initial instruction. That is what I care about right now. That is my focus. I'm going to have to, put all of these other shenanigans on the back burner until I follow through with that initial one.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And that's something I really that got hammered into me from doing a lot of like the parent training was like, okay, it's just that one thing. And they have
Yes.
to finish that one thing. And then you
Right.
can move on to something else. But until they do
Mhm.
that one thing, I mean, I think I had an extinction burst with my daughter once about her putting a puzzle away. And it lasted for like an hour because she refused to clean it up. Like she just wanted to
Yes.
escape. She didn't want to clean it up. And so I just sat there, kind of making sure she was in this general area as she screamed and flapped, and I just did deep breathing.
Uh-huh.
I was
Go to
like,
your special place.
yes, I found my Zen animal, and I was like, okay, like, we're gonna wait until you put this away. And then when she realized, oh, I just have to put it away and then I can go, then she was fine. But it took about an hour and a half of
Yep.
waiting, and then she never did it again, so it was kind
Yeah.
of again that massive action for that long-term gain
Yeah.
um, was really huge.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I like that you talked about making statements and not suggestions. I think that was one
Yes.
of the hardest things that I had to break as a parent
It's
was,
hard.
"Oh, can you go get me that?" And it's like, "No, no, no, go get me that." Like, that's
Yep.
hard.
And especially because, one of the things that we work so hard on in general is teaching our kiddos communication. So if I ask a question, the expectation is you answer. Like I don't just ask, and that's why, initially we reduce all rhetorical questions. So if I ask a question, I expect an answer. So if you say, "Can you go get me that?" Nope. And you're like, "Oh, shot myself in the foot on that one because I gave me a choice."
Yep,
Um, Answered me, which I've drilled into them that they need to answer. So
yes.
kudos to answering, errors on me.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my
So,
husband would do that every once in a while. I'm like, "You gave him a choice, so
right?
I know."
Gotta let it go.
I have a question for you though. This is
Sure.
something that I struggle with on the scheduling
Sure.
thing because in school, my son is very structured and very scheduled, and he does
Yeah.
really well with that. But we've always been nervous about having him too structured at home
Yeah.
because we're afraid that he will fall into really bad rigidity because sometimes he
Yeah.
can be OCD about like he wakes up, he has to turn on this light, and then he goes turns on the fish tank light, and then he turns off the light on the stairs,
Yeah.
and he does that without us ever having scheduled that for him. Like that's something
Because,
I don't know where he picked it up, but that's
right.
his like schedule in the morning. So we've
Yeah.
always been nervous about doing too much scheduling at home. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that that's a great point. And I think going back to what is the purpose of the schedule. So, at first, if you increase structure, then we can always teach and reinforce flexibility. So if we're using the schedule to increase structure, to decrease challenging behaviors, increase compliance, and some of those sorts of things, then it's great. And then when we're able to build in choices, um, normally we choose between, I don't know, apple juice and orange juice. But today, you know what? I actually got a juice box, a watermelon juice box. So I'm going to go ahead and say, do you want apple juice or do you want a watermelon juice box? So now I'm kind of throwing like a loop, or throwing him for a loop. Usually I let him choose between math or reading first. um, Today I'm going to actually choose, we're doing math first, and then he can choose, does he want to take a break outside, or does he want to take a break on the iPad?
Okay.
Kind of mixing it up that way.
Yeah.
First starting with things, choices, and different things that are actually reinforcing. So taking a break on outside or on the iPad, obviously that's reinforcing. and starting to slowly do those kinds of things. And then that way the flexibility piece is built in a little bit. Um, and then
That
also,
makes sense.
if you have a child that can really get stuck in different routines and things like that, um, use it to your advantage when you do need structure, and then uh, make the majority of the day like increase novel stimuli or increase novel instructions. You know, think about how you can continually vary that. Today we're going to do the schedule on the app on my phone. Tomorrow I'm going to, my phone's dead. Can't do anything about that. So we're going to use the Velcro schedule on the wall. Try to think about different ways that you can continually mix it up so
Okay.
that you don't get into
Okay.
that. But if you have a child that is more routine bound, you can always use it to your advantage in that way, and then figure out how to reinforce flexibility when you have the luxury to do that.
Awesome. Thank you. It's
Yeah,
extremely helpful. We've been trying to figure out how we can use the schedules, like, 'cause like I said, he's so good at them, but so
yeah,
that he's not rigidly bound to, like, this is what I do, and if I don't do it, I'm gonna like freak out.
yeah,
That's what our biggest fear is, I think, sometimes.
totally.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of things that come into play with that too. So you could have a schedule with coping skills. So here's my coping skills option, because I'm priming my child. So hey, buddy, mommy is going to change up these two things, and remember, you can use these coping skills. So kind of letting them know what's going to happen too. So hey, this is going to be really hard for you, but it's not going to be a big deal, and you can use these coping skills or whatever. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. You can also even do something like um, delay. So, for example, not the best example, but just go with it. With your son and the lights. So, as soon as he wakes up, um, you might say, "All right, I want you to turn on your light." I, um, and then, what we're going to do? We're going to get super crazy. And I want you to go turn the stair light off and then do your fish tank. And then, we're going to go ahead and reinforce that. And then, even if afterwards he turns them all off and starts over and does it his way, that's okay. But you had him do just a little bit flip flops between the stair and the fish tank. And as long as he followed through with that, and then go back and redo it, all right. And you can continue to delay um, his rigidity, so to
Yeah.
speak, in that way too. Or we're going to do it this way for just 30 seconds, and then you can do it your way,
Okay.
you
No,
know, depending
yeah.
on what it is.
That's really
And then
helpful.
reinforce those little time increments that you're having them do it a different way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Thank you. And
mhm,
Kelly, thank you so much for being here today and
yeah,
for focusing on this type of content. I think for a lot
absolutely.
of parents who are new to autism and new to having to troubleshoot problem behaviors, that
Right.
this kind of information is going to be very helpful to helping them work out problem behaviors. So thank you so much for
Yeah,
all of this and for putting this together for us today.
you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. We will see you later once COVID's all done.
Hopefully.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for watching this DAMES webinar. We hope that the information was helpful and empowering. To see more webinars like this one, consider becoming a member at www.damesusa.com.